Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's the boy Blackbeard. I'm back. So in the other tape on the other day, I kind of hinted at something that I want to go a little deeper to for you all, because it's something that all of us as Aboriginal people have inside because of the conditioned environment and because of basically the MK Ultra, the mass MK Ultra traumatic experience that we all went through from this prisoner of war situation, and then being denationalized and basically chronically lied to about, our origins, etc. See, when you don't have a home base and you don't have a foundation, you're really a loss. I want to salute the brother I see the Duke of Tears, but one thing he said that makes a lot of sense is that when you don't have a nationality or a home base, well, I'm using the word home base, but he was just say, when you don't have a nationality, or, you're not under your right status or your proper person, this leaves you open for demonic possession. And he's right, because whenever you're demonically possessed, you're being possessed and you're being controlled by something other than yourself. So whether it was the movie The Exorcist, and let's say you have the little regular girl who's a sweet little girl, but you have this particular entity that takes over the body of this little girl, and now it uses her the way it wants to use her, and it has her skin turning real, mutated and ugly. She's slobbing this black goo, she just looks like this deformed creature, which is what we call this demon in the movie The Exorcist. But that is actually just the personality of whatever it is that has this person under possession. Because we know originally this person was just a little girl who was normal. So that's kind of what happened to the denationalized American Muslims, or so-called black people. Just from the various conflicts and shit we were in with these, amalgamated, various nations, and even with the conflicts that we had with ourselves, this led to that denationalization process. And then we started to adopt these other labels that people put on us, such as Negro, Black, and Colored, and African American. These are labels that are put on us and actually, allow us and set us up to be demonically possessed, because whoever is the sorcerer that created the term Negro, Black, and Colored, and what they want that archetype to represent and what they want that to be, we will then begin to actually act out whatever that is. So when I think of, let's say, like Negroes, Blacks, and Coloreds, or African Americans, typically all I think of is just what you see every day in the so-called black community, and what you think of as so-called slave history and black history. It really don't go anything outside of that. It's a created entity that's actually owned by the United States corporation, and the bleached out amalgamated, families of Yaqub's children. That's who actually owns those Negro, Black, and Colored labels. So this is also why a lot of times when they have these police shootings and all these different things, and they have these national rituals, and they will always displace for the Aboriginal Moors to see, what happens when you don't have a real nationality, because, they don't really get any kind of justice in law. And this kind of takes you back to the Dred Scott case, because in the Dred Scott situation, you had a brother who was really an Aboriginal American, and he was going to, the United States courts to try to get some rights, but he was going as a so-called Negro, or a quote unquote black man, or a quote unquote descendant of Africa. And I want to say it was Judge Taney, but either way it go, those Caucasian Freemasons basically told them that that a Negro or a black has no rights that a white man has to follow. So this is what you get when you go in there under their, demonically charged items and labels. You know what I'm saying? Like, not only do they not respect you, but you don't get the desired results. And another thing that happens too is that you start to pass on certain traditions, and they show up in later bloodlines, and the later bloodline doesn't ever really know where it comes from. So in the tape a few days ago, I talked about something where I said that he or she who deals with the most bullshit, or he or she who suffers the most, gets the biggest crown. Now, I've noticed that in the so-called, now mind you, now I'm going to say this shit and keep up consciously what I mean by this. I've noticed in the so-called quote unquote black or Negro community. Now, mind you, now the black or the Negro community is a demonically possessed community. These are people who have been mislabeled, and they are now acting out and behaving out the new label that their slave master put on them, their Dutch slave master that they put on them. So that's what the Negro community, or the black community, or the African American community, or the colored community, that's what that is. That's not the Autochthonous community. That's not the Moorish community. That's not the Aboriginal Indigenous American community. That's not what that is. Okay. So the Moorish community or the Autochthonous community is different from the Negro or the black community. Okay, so this phenomenon I'm talking about right now, this is something that black people do, not Aborigines or not Moors, not people that are under their proper status and their proper spiritual position. These people don't do this. Negro, blacks, and colors do this shit that I'm talking about. But because we've all been born and been living in a Negro, black, and color society for so long, you know, we got to make sure that some of this shit ain't on us. But anyway, something I see kind of often in the black community is that we tend to give praise and thanks and worship to the people that suffer the most and deal with the most bullshit. So if it's a black man, he who gets in the most shootouts gets the biggest crown. He who sells the most dope gets the biggest crown. Basically, he who has caused the most destruction within his own community tends to get the biggest crown. He gets all the affection. He gets all the women. He gets all the attention. When it comes to the females, she who has the most kids gets the biggest crown, because I've noticed that when it comes to black women, there is this phenomenon to where if a sister don't have any children, she's looked at a certain way, and she's looked at almost like people turn their nose up at her. It's a lot of sisters that I may meet, you know, and they have goals and ambitions, so they may kind of, you know what I'm saying, may wait a few years to have their kid or whatever, right? And, you know, I've had them tell me that people just kind of look at them a certain way. And it's usually other so-called Negro or black women that already have children and that have already put themselves in that suffering position of being a single mother and not having really any resources and help. So a lot of, you know, Aboriginal women are actually attacked by black women because they don't have any children and they haven't been, you know, allowing their bodies to be demonically possessed by the single mother thing, because that single mother thing, that's part of the Negro female or the Negro woman or the black woman. That has nothing to do with the Aboriginal woman. That single mother phenomenon is a black woman thing. But I've noticed that the sisters who don't have any children, because maybe they trying to, you know, achieve certain things in the short term and the long term, they get looked at a certain way by the other Negro women who do have children. So that would be an example of she who suffers the most gets the biggest crown, because the woman that has the most children, they get the credit. So this is why, you know, you see in the so-called black community, like the woman who usually got the most kids, that's who everybody's going to tend to basically give the most slack to. They're going to kind of give her the biggest pass. You know what I'm saying? And I've just noticed that's what's going on. And also, too, you got to remember that in the Negro community, since it's a matriarch, you know, that's what the colonizers, the European colonial colonizers wanted that thing to be a matriarch, the demonically possessed Negro community or the black community. They wanted that to be a matriarch. So they have to pump up their whole mother thing. That's why in the so-called black community, it's the mother is this, the mother's the backbone, you know, or if it wasn't for mom, you know, mom this and mom that, they never give no, you know, praise to the father energy. And the reason why is because they want that idea of being a breeder and producing more and more de-nationalized Moors that could be slaves under the, you know, European colonial system. They need more and more of these mothers to do this. So that's why that mother thing is so highly financed within our community. I even saw that one of these companies like Hallmark, etc., but on one of these Mother's Days, sometimes they will have Mother Day cards that are put out, but you can tell that they really being marketed and they were created solely for black women. So-called black women. Now, mind you, I didn't say Aboriginal women. I said black women, because these phenomena have nothing to do with Aboriginal women. OK, that's why on my tapes, you can tell when I'm talking about Aboriginal women and when I'm talking about Negro bed stenches or something like that. Like I said before, it's not called an Aboriginal bed stench. It's not called the Moorish bed stench. It's not called the Autochthonous bed stench. It's called the Negro bed stench. So they're showing you that this person that does the ghetto gaggery and this type of stuff, this is a demonically possessed person. They are under the identity or under the assumed position of something that has nothing to do with them. OK, nothing to do with them. But anyway, so you have that phenomenon. So continuing on, just overall in the so-called black community, you know, the people who suffer the most, we give them credit. Like when we have people who are successful, we look at it like the person who was living in the most poverty and who had the shit the most fucked up, like they get the most credit. So you'll have one person say, you know, well, I grew up and, you know, and I didn't have my dad around. And then another person say, well, I grew up and I didn't have my mom or dad around. And then the next person say, well, I grew up and I didn't have my mom and dad and I was homeless. And then black people will be like, oh, ooh. And we'll give all the praise to the person who had the most fucked up situation. So what we tend to do is we raise up people who really are not in the position to help us. Because if we giving all the praise to people who've been fucked up the most, and this is who we choose to be like our leaders, and we choose to have these people as the herus or the symbols of the community, then now you can see why everything is so fucked up. If the black woman that's getting all the niggas' attention is the one that's once again got all the kids, you know what I'm saying? Or basically doing something that plays into she who suffers the most. Because also she who suffers the most gets the most attention. If you don't believe me, the woman who is willing to cut her body up the most to get that perfect shape and suffer the most, the black woman that's willing to stick and inject more cement and more glue into her butt and go through that pain, the so-called black woman who's willing to suffer the most by getting the facial manipulations, by changing her nose shape and all these other things, the black woman who's willing to suffer the most by bleaching and perming her scalp and literally ripping her own hair out and changing the color and attempting to change the texture of her hair, suffers the most. She's gonna get the most attention. The so-called black woman. Now, mind you, these are all demonically possessed archetypes. I'm not talking about Moorish women and none of this shit. The black woman that's willing to change her eye color is going to be the one that gets the most attention. So basically, you know, you got to remember that beauty, and women will tell you this, and a woman probably come in my comment section if she'll keep it 100. But beauty takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of, you know, suffering and pain to a certain degree too. You know, like for example, like when I see a lot of these sisters that had on braids, they be looking fine as hell. I just keep it 100. They be like extremely fine when they be having all them different little braids, but shit, you know, but they got to sit there and get their hair braided and that shit be tight as hell. Like how I know, because when I was a young teenager, I used to have longer hair and I had braids, and that shit used to hurt like hell when you first get it done. So, you know, yeah, she fine as hell with these braids, but her scalp is also being pulled at. So women will tell you, you know what I'm saying, especially black women, that she who suffers the most will get the most attention. And it's no different with Negroes or so-called black men. You know, the nigga who get in the most danger, the nigga who got the longest rap sheet, the nigga who known for having the most baby mamas, they like, damn, he getting all the pussy. That's going to be the guy that's going to get the biggest crown within the community. You know, and a lot of that shit is sick to me. You know what I'm saying? And we got to make sure that we don't have none of that inside of us, because that's that slave shit. That's no different than, well, I picked up 10 bales of cotton for massa. Oh, well, I picked up 20 bales of cotton for massa. Oh, well, I picked up 40 bales of cotton for massa. That's all that is. You know what I'm saying? Just like today. Oh, my job, I get paid, you know, $40,000 a year. Oh, I get paid $60,000 a year. Oh, I get paid $90,000 a year. But I guarantee the more you get paid when you're working for these European colonial corporations, the less you around your Aboriginal family. And then our families are already fractured like fuck anyway. So that means probably the more you getting paid, the more fucked up your home probably is. Because you ain't there. Because these folks have y'all on these jobs all day, every day. So this is just a sickness that we have adopted, and it's been passed down for quite some time. And the recent generations, you know, we didn't create it, we inherited it. Because like I told you all in my old tape, you know, dealing with the Aboriginal Muslims or the Aboriginal Hebrews of the Old Testament or the Quran, you know, when you have this blood passed down to you from old ancestors, you will, you know, take on their mentalities and how they adopted and reacted to certain things. So that mentality of just wanting to praise the Caucasian slave driver, you know, or the Caucasian prisoner of war capturer, and just like suffering the most for his entertainment, you know, that shit is praised. And that's why we do that shit, because we know that whoever suffers the most is actually providing this so-called Caucasian man and woman, because it's both of them now. Whoever is suffering the most is providing them the most pleasure. Because I've noticed in the so-called white community or the Caucasian community, it's actually the complete opposite. He or she who has the most slack actually is praised the most. Because white so-called Caucasian people look at it like, if you're doing a lot of chilling and a lot of slacking around, that means you probably have a lofty or pretty big inheritance or trust fund or a big checking account that you sitting on. So that means that it's giving you more time to be slothful and lazy and kick around and do whatever you want to do, whether it be golfing all day, etc. So with black, so-called black people, the person who puts in the most work gets the biggest crown. Whereas with white people, the person who puts in the less work, they get the biggest crown. And that's how that shit goes. I know this shit because I was around them when I was in my collegiate years. You know what I'm saying? Like I've noticed that within the white community, the people who seem like they the happiest, the people who got the most freedom are the ones that have the most slack. You know, my brother's roommate, this guy, you know, he was one of the kings of slack. You see what I'm saying? He was a Caucasian male, one of the kings of slack. And he would be esteemed within his community. You know what I'm saying? One of the kings of slack. He could sit around, basically do whatever he want. You know, because he had a little money put to the side. So he had to always put in so much work and effort. You know, and within his community, he would be respected for that. You know what I'm saying? So that's just something I've kind of noticed. Now, is that exact on all ends? Of course not. You know, you're going to have some Caucasian people who look at slacking or sitting around and they don't look at that like it's something cool and you're not going to get a crown for it. Just like with so-called copper or black people or Aboriginal people. You know, not all of us give credit to the nigga who went through the most bullshit. So, for example, with me, you're not going to get any credit for that because I look at that as a bunch of fuckery. And then I'll wrap it up with this. When LeBron James first came to the NBA, I can remember he said he talked with Allen Iverson for a little while. He said Allen Iverson kind of was giving him some jewels. And I'm kind of paraphrasing and giving you a summary of it. But long story short, Allen Iverson told LeBron James, look, these people are going to give you the Superman cape. They're going to, you know, place you on Mount Zion. They are going to place you on Mount Sinai. You know, everybody going to be in love with you. You're going to be the man. But basically what he told LeBron James is like, you know, but when they do that, don't accept that Superman coat because what's going to happen is eventually they're going to pull that thing from you. So what happens is within and obviously LeBron James listened because he's been successful to this day and he hadn't been taken out by that fuckery. But I kind of said that to say that, you know, with so-called black people who really are Aboriginal Muslims, Americans, you know, we got to get out the idea of wanting to always look so strong and tough and always wanting to look like a Superman or a Superwoman. I mean, just take it from Blackbeard Mirage. Like, I don't walk around trying to be Superman every day. Like, it's days where I just want to be on some chill shit. It's some days where I don't feel like, you know, going into combat and going into battle all the time. Will that mode kick in with me a lot? Yes, because I'm kind of naturally a combative person. I'm naturally wired for confrontation. So that may not be as best for me. But even when it comes to confrontation, like, I don't feel like goddamn going to war all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I'm with my family just chilling, or if I'm with one of my ladies, we just chilling, or, you know what I'm saying? I'm playing Madden or something like that because I like to do that. Like, I'm not really in that mood. Like, you know, so we don't have to always be in Superman mode. We don't have to always be in workhorse mode. You know, you're not working for so-called massa no more. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're at a point now where we got to be a lot more strategic with our resources and with our physical bodies because you can't wear your physical body out. And a lot of my ancestors, you know what I'm saying, they died early because of that. You know, I come from a bloodline of hard workers. Like, I come from a bloodline of people who will not sit down. And that's just how they are. They don't come from a slave culture. It's just come from them being indigenous to the land and them always used to basically growing their own food and doing all their own stuff. You know, but there still is a time where, you know, my uncle would be going in and I'd be thinking like, damn, you know, let's go sit down or something like that. But he's still going in, you know, because that's just how he's wired. And then when I hear stories about my grandfather, he was the same way, you know, just going in, you know what I'm saying? And it's good to have that because, you know, you're gonna have to be able to put in work, you know, but we got to balance it out because we got to also kick in the slack, because when you kick in the slack, that's when a lot of your intuition and a lot of your creative and imagination starts flowing. Like, a lot of times you got to be sitting down to kind of let your mind and your thoughts, you know, filter through yourself. And you got to kind of screen yourself. But if you always in a state of doing something, you know, you're not really catching all that. And that's another problem with our people. We always thinking that, man, if I work an extra 5 hours, you know, that'll be an extra $60. Or if I do you know what I'm saying, I work another double this. It's like, nah, man, don't work the double. Just go ahead and go home. You know what I'm saying? Like, I understand that, you know, this world and this corporate system that we live in, this corporate environment, this corporate digital matrix, I understand that, you know, we have an oligarchy of people who have chosen to colonize the world's resources. And they have put this digital, you know, or really this right now, this paper currency system out here. And it can have you fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Because we need money to pay our bills and we need food to eat for ourselves and our families. But I know it's a lot easier said than done, but you know, we can't let this shit really get us to the point where we always in work mode. Like, there got to be a point where you just kind of let that shit go and do what you can do and just chill and just go to the next day. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. At least that's just a real big philosophy I live on. Like, when it's time for me to work, I do the work. But when I see it's a chill time, you better believe Blackbeard Mirage is about to chill. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, whether I'm about to pop in a video game, you know, whether I'm about to read a book, or whether it's something as simple as me just sitting there talking to my mom, you know, or whether it's me, you know, like I said, I'm hanging with a nice young woman. Like, you know, I'm very, very quick to go do things that I want to do, because that's what I'm here to do on earth. You know what I'm saying? I'm here to be a servant of the land, because that's what Allah, the higher self, put me here to do. But I'm not here to be a slave. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know how you all feel about that, but I'm not a slave to nobody. The only thing I am a servant of the higher self, the servant of Allah, as they would say. You know, so I serve what the spiritual divine being wants me to do, and I serve what the ancestor want me to do. You know what I'm saying? But the ancestor or the divine or the Most High or Allah, he ain't got you on go all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, even they say, you know, that Allah, the Most High, created in 6 days and rested on the 7th. So even the Most High chills. You know what I'm saying? Even the Most High is not in work mode all the time. So that's just a demonic possession or a demonic frequency that's been put on us, basically by these dark, you know, black magicians, you know, that come from these Caucasian and these boule societies that have us basically just wired within this, you know, matrix. But, you know, we got to get out that mentality of he or she who suffers the most gets the biggest crown. It's just a bunch of bullshit. And it take you to an early grave. You know, just take it from me. I didn't get to meet any of my grandfathers because of this. And I didn't even, you know, get to be around my own father really because of this. You know what I'm saying? Because they were always running out to either work, or they were trying to figure out how to defeat this system because they knew it was only about money. And a lot of the times, you know what I'm saying, this stuff can, you know, cause a wedge in families, and you know, and you don't even get to see your kids grow up like you want to. You know, it was a lot of things in my life that my father missed because he was just consumed with trying to figure out how he can survive within this financial world, to the point where he even missed out on family. You know, so a lot of this shit, you know what I'm saying, y'all don't repeat these mistakes. Don't repeat them. But it's the boy Blackbeard. Just want to drop this classic. Stay tuned. I'm out.